you don't want to just blow through that and get it done because you're off. Because what do they say? It's you're only as good as your last job, and your last script is always your resume. I have a topic for today. I wrote it into the title. It's actually not even my topic. It's Nick's topic, because I love that Nick wrote all these topics. And actually, for anyone that listens or watches that has any topics that they'd like to talk about, or like us to talk about, I should say, leave them in the comments, because I'll tell you, there's great things that he came up with that I didn't even think about, and it's perfect.
Totally.
One of the things he has here came up literally 2 days ago in our normal writing session conversation, and it has to do with planning for the future. And I'll read what he says here. Planning for the future. How far ahead do you consider your career? Only as far ahead as whatever projects you're juggling currently? Do you have longer term plans of how you'd like your careers to develop? Any consideration of the evolution of the types of stories you're writing / movies you'd want to make? I'd assume there's probably a balance struck. So I guess the question is about striking a balance between thinking toward the longer term future and being fully invested in the projects you're writing, developing currently. I think it's really astute. And I think that it is something that we constantly talk about, like all the time.
I mean, literally, as you said just before we got on, yesterday we were having, because we had, at the start of last week, we went through the list of our projects that we have in some form of development, in some form of active development, whether it's, this is a movie we want to write next, this is
an idea that we're wanting to do, something that's on our priority list.
We prioritized them. And we've forgotten one. I came across a book last year that I really liked. I'm getting a weird delay.
You sound great to me. But if you'd like to disconnect and then connect again, I'm going to continue telling the story, and you come back for a second. So basically, what happened was Jake had found this book in, I think he was out with his kid at one of these cool bookstores in Portland, and it was a really great children's book. And we have a lot of experience adapting books in one way or another, and he came to me and he was like, "Oh, this is this really cool story. I haven't seen this story in this way before." Now the book isn't like a giant bestseller. It's not something that is being chased by a million people, but it's a really solid story. And so we decided that this was something that we would want to pursue. I just told a little backstory. Jake is back now. For those listening, he is back. Jake White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay. Basically what I'm saying is that you found this great book. It had a really good story, unique take on a story that we hadn't seen before. It's not a New York Times bestseller, but it's a good book. No one's actively chasing it as far as we know. You reached out to the author. He said, I'd absolutely be open to doing something with you guys. And he gave us his representation's contact information.
Yes.
And when that came about, we looked at our slate at that time and said, I think at that time we had at least 2 book adaptations that we were already working on. Possibly 3. I can't remember. We had a bunch of originals and other things on our plate. One of which, we already have a shopping agreement for a different book series, and so we decided, you know what, we just can't take on another project that is going to require some form of a ticking clock, because when you get a shopping agreement, it means you have to do something with that material within a period of time, or you no longer have access to the material. And you can ask to renew it, and depending on your relationship with the writer and whatnot, I'm sure that there's people who have shopping agreements for years. But generally speaking, you're lucky to get a full year, especially at our level.
Yeah.
And so we were like, rather than us trying to get this shopping agreement with all this other stuff on our slate, we're still trying to package the first book series. And then all of a sudden we start that clock ticking.
Yeah.
Let's hold off. And so that's an example, I think, of us always thinking about our career. And interestingly, the book came up again yesterday. You had brought it up because we originally had said we were going to address it in the new year.
Yeah.
But things didn't happen in the fall the way we thought.
Yeah.
A lot of projects got pushed to this year, so we still have a whole bunch of things that are on our slate that we thought would have been off our slate by now.
That's right. For better or worse.
Yes, for better or worse. Yeah. So we decided again, you know what, let's hold off a little bit, at least until one or two of the things drop off so that we have a bit of a flow. I think that there's two real big parts of this question. I think part of the question is juggling current projects versus future projects. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the question is, where do you want to be in your career and how do you think about that? Or do you just focus on where you're at right now? Mm-hmm. We definitely do both. I think we're always thinking about where we want to go. What would you say about juggling projects, Jake? I'm going to pass the baton.
Yeah. So in terms of juggling projects, it's interesting because for me, the question comes down to a couple of things, one of which is workflow. What does each project need at where it's at that particular time? And how genuinely, how many different things can you do a day? So I think we can probably, again, it depends where different things are at.
Yeah.
I think we can probably manage, and we've talked about this briefly in the past, manage about 3 projects well at any one time. If we start to add more, I think
it's stressful.
We start to suffer. So for example, our day today looked like this. We got on first thing in the morning, had a little catch up. Then we did some writing
for project 1.
On project 1.
Yeah.
Then we had a meeting in the middle of this. We had a meeting on a project that we're producing.
Right.
And that didn't require creative.
No. Yeah. I would almost like compartmentalize those.
Then we got together and we did work on a pitch for the book series that Ben was just talking about.
Project 2.
And this is a pitch. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Then we're doing this. And this kind
Project 3.
Fits in a kind of smaller hole because it's
but it still requires creative energy. I mean, this is an hour. In fact, I gotta be honest, I think this requires more energy than our normal hour.
I think so too. Yeah, see, we're very much engaged in it. But then after this, we're going to go and talk about another. I know I said 4 and it starts to get messy, but again, I don't hold this project in my mind much out of this space, but I do on the other projects. I hold them in my mind, even in the background, So anyway, after this,
it's going to start to change. I feel like this project, we've been very religious about saying, okay, this process is only going to happen when we're online. Yeah. But the interesting thing, and you just bring this up, and so I'm just going to kind of comment on it. When we are working on a script, even if let's say we are juggling 3, and let's say we dedicate 2 hours to one project, that doesn't mean that we're only thinking about that project during those 2 hours. So really, if we're really wanting to be like authentic about our process in this podcast, authentically, like we would never, ever not think about the script that we're working on when we're not together during the day. Yeah. Work ends at 5:00. We have dinner with our families. I'm sitting on the couch and I go, oh, you know what? This thing's really bugging me. Or I'm in the shower the next morning and go, oh, this is a great idea for a scene. Like
wake up in the middle of the night with a thought.
That is part of the process. So it's interesting that you bring that up because I've had the same experience. And maybe Maybe.
I think it will start to shift when we get into pages.
Well, definitely we'll have to start to shift when we get into pages, but maybe it's also why some of this stuff hasn't been getting resolved as quickly as it should.
Probably.
Maybe some of these issues that we've discovered like over the last 2 weeks or so are things that may have been resolved had we been thinking about them.
Yeah.
Podcast.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, that is interesting.
But yeah. So, but when it comes to juggling projects, you know, I mean, and it's precisely why I think we said, hey, we can't quite fit this book in until at least 2 or 3 months away, because we just haven't got the creative bandwidth to do it justice. Because you want to do things well. You want to do things well. You don't want to half-ass anything.
Yeah.
And we've said that before.
Yes.
We don't want to just phone something in, because again, you go, what's short term, what's
long term. It gives me anxiety. Like I literally can't do it.
Totally.
Yeah.
This idea that if you are thinking long term, you'll go, I don't want to put a crummy script out into the world.
Right.
I don't want to put a script that people are going to read and go, nah, not really. So because then it becomes
segueing. Actually, it's a really good segue into thinking about the future and thinking about, are you just focused on the current script, or are you focused on what is ahead? And I think the current script and what is ahead are actually joined at the hip. Like the thing that you're working on now, like you're saying, it's like you don't want to just blow through that and get it done because you're off. Because what do they say? It's you're only as good as your last job, and your last script is always your resume. And so the script that goes out to, no matter what stage you're at in your career, whether it's to agents and managers, whether it's to producers, whether it's to the studio, that's your most recent calling card.
Yeah, for sure.
And so part of the choosing process, even for us, when we decide, well, what is a script we're going to work on, has to do with the future. It has to do with, well, what do we want going out into the world next?
How many times have we said, oh, that's a great movie? That's not a movie we write.
Right.
Because that's not our brand.
Or that would be a really good movie one day.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when we're able to branch out further.
Totally. Well, now is that something that we produce?
Right.
Right. These are all.
And I think that, I'm going to take it all the way back to even before we'd ever sold anything. And the planning for the future and the question about going, what did we want for our career? And it was interesting, and I may have told this story on the podcast before, so please forgive me. 52 episodes in, I can't fucking remember. But we started writing, you and I, in genre. We've always loved genre. Our mindset was we're going to make our own movie. In that particular moment in our lives, back in our, I guess it was late 20s for me, mid 20s for you, we were going, we're going to write a movie and we're going to go, we're going to make it, and so like the scripts that we were focusing on were these lower budget genre films that we felt, because even though we knew nothing about this industry, we felt we could somehow find a producer and then actually be involved and sell this movie that's not just a script, but also like us being involved in the movie. And I think what was interesting is that we ended up getting a manager off of one of those scripts. And we started pitching him ideas, and he didn't quite get what we were pitching. And he said to us, and I think it's probably the most beneficial thing he ever said to us, what kind of writers do you want to be 10, 15 years from now? Like, what do you want to be writing? And we said, well, we love, big action, popcorn genre. We want to write Star Wars. We want to write Marvel. And he said, so why are you giving me this Why aren't you giving me that?
Mm-hmm.
Why, like, give me a big 4-quadrant tentpole movie if that's the kind of writers you want to be.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of writers out there will really disagree with that advice, because the truth is it's much harder to sell that kind of movie.
It is.
But I will say, while it's harder to sell that kind of movie, I'm not sure that it's harder than starting in a genre or a place that you don't really want to be and spending years and years and years and years to try and build out of that place. Because a lot of people we know who do smaller independent movies and they make a living, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And to get to the big studio level movies has been a real challenge for them.
Yeah.
Not that it's ever impossible. A lot of
it's never
small movies. Again, everybody's journey is different.
Everyone's journey.
But yeah, I think that in our minds, and we both used to practice Buddhism. Jake still practices Buddhism. We used to chant together as part of our writing sessions, and we used to chant about like wanting to like sell big.
Yeah.
I remember like back in the day, like visualizing, I'm going to sell a movie for $1 million. Like that was like always, it was like, that's what I want. And I think that the advice of saying, okay, think about your future and then gear your career towards what that vision is was really good, because we went away and we wrote a giant $100 million 4-quadrant movie, but we did it.
We wrote 3, didn't we? We did one after the other. We wrote 3 spec scripts that were in that space, and the third one sold.
Yeah, I guess we did write 3, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. And actually, he did tell us that advice before even the first one, which interestingly is coming back in its own way right now.
It's exactly right. It is, isn't that?
But these movies were big 4-quadrant popcorn, expensive but high concept movies.
Yeah.
And because that's what we were putting out into the world, you know what it attracted? Bigger producers.
Absolutely. And the kind of producers who
when you have a script, right? When you have a script that's going to be
exactly right.
$100 million, you're not going to send it to a low-level producer. The only people that are going to get it are your bigger producers. And so those were the contacts we started making.
Yeah. We didn't go away and write a $2 million horror movie and then suddenly get approached by a producer saying, hey, I want to do the origin story of Santa Claus. Right. It was... We'd already written
He read our sample.
He read our
Beauty and the Beast sequel.
We wrote a Beauty and the Beast sequel called Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. We did the Cameron with it.
But we made the S.
Beauty and the Beasts, $signs.
But we made both of the S's $signs. And
yeah. And it was, for whatever reason, it was a very fun script, but Guillermo del Toro literally announced that he was doing Beauty and the Beast, which he never did. I think it was like 2 weeks before.
I think it was like 2 weeks before, yeah. And Disney was grumbling about doing this. Went out, didn't sell, but this producer got that. And because we'd written in that space.
Yeah. That wasn't the movie that sold. That was just that ended up, now we had the intention of selling it. We brought it out to the market. We would never, and we've talked about this multiple times, we didn't just write that as a sample.
Right.
But it became our sample for the next producer.
Completely.
And the next producer is who we worked on, the great Lawrence Gray, who we worked on Winter's Night with. Yeah. And then that being our big breakthrough, which sold for $1 million. So there's some planning for the future, energy going out there.
Yeah.
That script became our calling card for the next... forever. It's still well, The Princess probably is the script that people know us by most currently. And it was a funny joke because our manager was like, you guys are kind of going backwards in a way. Like in a backwards and yet forwards at the same time. It's like we wrote a smaller movie, but it got made.
Yeah, right.
It's still within the genre that we love. It was still a popcorn action genre movie.
Yeah.
So we stayed within our brand, but interestingly, that's another example of exactly what Nick's question is. When we sat down, we were in a period where we had just finished a couple projects. We didn't know what we were going to write next. I think we were negotiating a possible deal, but we knew it was going to take 3 months because that's how long deals take.
Sure. Yeah.
And we were like, well, what we haven't had a spec go out in a really long time. We were thinking forward. We were going, we can't just sell pitches forever because nobody gets to read those.
Yes. What we wanted wasn't it? We wanted to get read again by the town.
Well, because what happens is you become somewhat siloed into the people that know your work.
Yes.
And yet you can't necessarily share your newest work because it's not out there and technically under contract. You can't share it.
You're not really supposed to share scripts that you're working on for another studio.
No.
It's not that you're not supposed to. You're not allowed to.
You're legally in your contract not allowed to.
Yeah.
So now if it goes out into the world like a spec, like Winter's Night did, well, everyone has it.
Yeah,
so we were like, you know what? We've sold a bunch of movies to Sony, which was fantastic. I think at that point we'd sold 4.
Yeah.
But we hadn't sold to any other studios.
Yeah.
We sold a movie to a Chinese studio, and we'd worked in TV at other studios, but we hadn't sold a movie. And so we were like, we need a movie spec to go out to the market for people to read, to remind people about who we are. So we were really thinking strategically. But we also knew we're never going to spend our time writing a sample. We want to do something. So what was the next step in our career? We were like, well, we've been working for, at that point, it was 6+ years professionally.
Yeah.
6.5. We're like, we need to get something made.
Yeah.
Like, if we want to jump to that next stage of being produced screenwriters, we got to get something made. So strategically, we sat down and we went through all of our ideas, which ones could get made. And then I pitched you The Princess specifically as, here's a movie that's contained, that still lives within everything that we do, but could get made. And then it did. So I think it's a really astute thing for Nick to ask, and for any screenwriter out there who has ambitions to continue to move forward. You do need to be looking at the next stage. What is the next milestone? What is the next big thing? And how is what you're working on now going to get you there?
Yes.
How is this script going to be the thing that gets me closer to my next goal? What's really interesting, I know we're going over on this conversation, but it's actually
good topic.
It's a really good topic. So thank you, Nick. What's really interesting about this topic is we reached a point, I want to say it was in August, where The Princess was out in the world. We'd had a movie produced. It was made. We had all this other stuff that was like on our slate, various different places. And I think I said to you, I don't know what the next thing is.
Yeah.
I was like, for all this time, since the very first script I ever wrote, I'd always gone, I know what my next hurdle is, or my next benchmark is, or the next, I'm writing this script because, not just because I want to sell it, but because I have a vision for where things are going to continue to go in the future. And I was like, what is it?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
And we talked about it for quite a while. And one of the things that we interestingly talked about was, well, we want to write things that we're more involved in and can
produce. Absolutely.
Luckily, we had a producing credit on The Princess. We were involved in a lot of the early stuff of putting that movie together. We did not get to be as involved as we wanted to be during the studio days of the process. And so we were like, maybe the next hurdle for us is to really be more involved in our own projects, to write a movie that we love, that we can actually see to fruition and be involved in casting, be involved in, locations and stuff that we don't, as writers, usually get to be involved in.
Of course.
The producers that do that.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really proud of us because I'm only just thinking of this now. That's exactly what we've been doing since.
What we've been doing. Yeah, it's true.
And granted, the stuff that we are producing on the side of the things that we're writing, that's not quite the same goal. But you know what? It leads to that goal.
It does lead to that goal.
Because that experience of producing those movies only then makes it stronger for us to produce our own.
Completely. Absolutely. And when we say we want to be producers, they can say, well, what have you produced? We can go, this selection of fine motion pictures.
Exactly. And, you know, we have a TV show that we're going to be taking out. We are going to be executive producers on that.
Yeah.
Hopefully when it lands at the place that it's going to land.
Yeah.
And I think every script that we are writing currently, every project, our intention is to be producers on that movie. Now, here's the difference between plans and intention. You can intend for something to happen.
That's what I was going to kind of say something about that earlier. It's great to have, you know, forward goal, forward intention, forward momentum towards that, and also be malleable.
Yes.
I think it's important to go. The phrase I like is ready, fire, aim.
Ready, fire, aim.
So you ready yourself, you start taking action towards it, and then if you're not on course, you can kind of go, okay, well, it's actually going to be this, or it's actually going to be that. You know, like, be malleable to changing course if you need to be.
Interesting phrase, ready, fire, aim. One might think of that saying and go, are you drunk?
Philosopher.
Ready, fire, aim.
Yeah. You know, it's like, get as ready as you can, then take action, and then move things accordingly on the way. Because it won't go exactly the way that you...
Not only will it not go the way that you planned, it will never go the way.
It'll never go the way you planned. I mean, and here's the thing: like, we've got all these, you know, projects that we are going to work on, that we want to work on. If tomorrow we got a call and said, you know, Lucasfilm wants to meet you about Star Wars,
right? Yeah.
You know,
anyone watching this from Lucasfilm, I mean, we have met with you. You can call us. Pick up, hey, phone.
But you know, like, that would then go, okay, that plan is changed.
Of course. I mean, look, also, and one of my favorite sayings, I'm going to use my own.
Go on.
One of my favorite sayings is always shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll land somewhere amongst the stars.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And that truly, truly is how I try and live this career. Don't always succeed, but I want us to always have ambitions that are greater than where we are today, and always be planning and shooting for what those ambitions are. And we will most likely miss at least 90% of the time. But if we're shooting there, we'll hopefully land somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's planning for the future. I could talk about this
all day.
Literally all day.
Planning for the future. I mean, don't get me started.
There's so many different variations on this topic. I'm going to actually put this comment on screen. So Nick, who we've mentioned multiple times, has said graciously that anyone with questions can post them in the comments of any video. Gosh, Nick. And he'll add them to the list of questions that he's already compiling. So that's awesome.
Thanks, Nick.
You guys now have the opportunity to get your questions on the list. I'm not going to guarantee that we'll answer them, but I will guarantee that we'll read them.
Yeah. We've actually been pretty good about it, though.
We have.
We've had a sensible amount of comments.
Yes.
Yeah, it's never been crazy.
It's been sensible so far. By the way, one more thing before we open this outline, because I'm going to open it no matter whether we work on it or not.
Right.
It's going to be open on the screen.
Totally.
We're at 199 followers as of today.
That's great.
On YouTube, of course.
That's great.
And I said, what was it, like, I don't know, a week ago? I was like, I want to be at 200. And we were hoping to get to it, I think, like at the end of the month.
Yeah.
But,
I'm just gonna go ahead and unsubscribe quick.
Oh, you jerk! I love our followers. I love our listeners and our viewers. I think it's great. I love the feedback and the engagement. And honestly, it does keep us coming back every day to work on this script.
Well,
thank you.
It gets
Thank
me to
you.
put a t-shirt on, but no pants.
All right, let's dive in. It's time.